Perfect. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started here. Hopefully everybody can see my screen and hear me okay. And today we're going to be talking about how to develop an effective recall program. So first off, hello and welcome. I am actually in San Francisco today. I am doing this from my hotel room because I am attending the NCIA Business Summit here. So if you're at the business summit, hopefully I get to see you today or tomorrow. And so I'm working off my laptop in my hotel room. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay on my headset. Once again, everybody is muted. So please hold your questions until the end and type those into the chat box. But I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedules to learn more about how to develop an effective recall program. My name is Tyler Williams. I'm the Chief Technical Officer here at CSQ, and I will be hosting this webinar today. This is going to be a relatively brief lunch and learn that we're doing because it's such a very narrow topic. But hopefully everybody gets some good value out of this and can take this back to your companies and hopefully if you don't have a recall program to put one in place, and if you do have a recall program, which I hope everyone does, hopefully you can make it a little bit more robust and start thinking about things and ways to improve it. Once again, this will be recorded and sent out to everyone after the webinar either today or tomorrow. So first, I just want to give a little overview of CSQ for those who are not familiar with us. So CSQ was launched in 2020 to promote industry best practices and improve the overall safety and quality of cannabis and cannabis-infused products in the market. The CSQ certification program was built around ISO and the Global Food Safety or GFSI benchmarking requirements. Our vision is to become the cannabis industry's most trusted source for safety and quality certification. And our mission is to provide the cannabis industry with reliable and trusted industry standards that help certified sites minimize risk and protect their brand, as well as the health and well-being of consumers around the world. We have four main goals here at CSQ. One is global standardization, so making sure that we're developing standards for the industry based on best practices in science and international standards to promote fair trade and ensure there's no unnecessary barriers to trade, and then obviously to protect consumers' health and safety through the development of standards and best practices. And our overall goal is to become the cannabis industry's most trusted source for safety and quality certification. Without further ado, let's get into what we are here for today and talk about recall plans. And let's first start with, why is having a recall plan important? I hope this is pretty obvious to everyone why you need a recall plan in place, but we are going to go over a couple of the reasons why you should. Obviously, compliance to local regulations is why most people put one in place. And then also compliance to third-party standards such as CSQ. It is a requirement to have a recall plan in place and meet the requirements set forth in the standard. But also a recall plan is important because it helps you identify if an issue needs a market recall or not. So you're not making unnecessary recalls, all right? And then also a faster response time to real or actual recall incidents, which could have some benefits within itself, like saving some brand reputation with retailers and consumers, a higher likelihood of getting less consumers sick or worse, and then potentially less financial burden, right? Nobody wants to have a recall. They're very costly. You can get people sick or worse, and you can ruin your brand reputation. So, excuse me. So by having a recall plan in place, you minimize the damage that is done from the issue or mistake that led to that recall. So there's three key steps to developing a recall. The first one, defining roles and responsibilities. Step two, which is the majority of where the bulk of work goes into, is actually developing the recall action plan. So basically, step by step, what are you going to do when there is a recall? And then the last step is practice makes perfect, or conducting mock recalls to make sure that it's great that if you have a recall plan in place, but if you don't practice it at all, then when the time comes, which hopefully it doesn't, that you have an actual recall, at least you have been through this program and your recall team is trained and knows what to do and makes that process go faster instead of dusting off a binder or an SOP that was stowed away when an actual recall happens and trying to figure it out then. So we do need to practice that, and we'll talk about that later. Let's first start with roles and responsibilities. So the first thing you need to do is establish a recall coordinator. Typically, I always suggest having more than one, especially if you're a facility that maybe operates 24/7. You have a day shift and a night shift. It's probably good to have at least one person on each shift that is designated as that recall coordinator. And the recall coordinator's responsibility is to really gather the recall team and make sure that divvy out the responsibilities and tasks that are needed to be completed to actually perform a successful recall. So that recall coordinator is the most important person, and we'll talk a little bit about some examples of people that might be in that position here in a second. The next step is to define and assign responsibilities to a recall team. We'll kind of go through those here in a moment as well. You need to have emergency contact information for the recall team readily available. And the reason why I say emergency contact information is a lot of times recalls, they don't happen when we want them to happen, right? We never plan for a recall. It just happens, right? So, these people, once again, if you're working two shifts and this is an issue that happens at night, most of your recall team probably is working on the day shift, most likely. And so we need to have their cell phone information or emergency contact line to make sure that we have everyone on the same page and not just their desk line or their main line at the office. The recall team should be composed of various individuals or departments. Below are some examples of a recall team broken down by responsibilities and departments or individuals that could possibly be involved. These are just examples. These tasks or roles that I've identified here are examples from recall plans that I've developed in the past for clients. But this is generally kind of what you see. But once again, it's going to be completely up to you and your company and your facility's needs to decide what these roles and responsibilities are and who's going to fill these roles. So first, recall coordinator. This is like with the recall coordinator, the main job that they have is determining if a recall needs to be made or not. So this is probably going to be somebody within your senior management or somebody in a VP of quality role or something like that. Your recall evaluation team, these are the people that's going to determine what needs to be recalled, what was the issue. So this is most of the time going to be people in QA positions, so your QA manager, or if you have an on-site laboratory, this could be a lab technician or lab managers that are helping identify whether or not a recall needs to happen and how much of the product it has been affected. Recall identification team. This is who is going to determine how much product was affected and find out where that product is in the supply chain. Is it still on site? Has it already been shipped to warehouses or retailers? Or is it already in consumers' hands? So examples of those are going to be things like plant managers, production supervisors, or inventory managers who probably have access to the inventory management system or the ERP system, things like that. The recall notification team. This is who's going to give a notice to your suppliers that there is a recall and how much of that product that either needs to be returned or destroyed. This could also be the team that speaks to the public. So in this position, if your company has a PR person or uses a third-party public relations person or company, excuse me, then they're likely going to fill this role. Legal counsel is going to be involved in this team, as well as probably your sales, who may be the ones reaching out to your retailers or customers, excuse me, to let them know that this recall has been initiated. And then the recall disposal team, so who's actually going to dispose of the affected product, if that's what needs to be done. So this could be maintenance, this could be sanitation staff, this could be your QA team. But once again, these are all just examples of roles and responsibilities. You can tailor this kind of to fit in your company however you would like. So now that we've developed or put together our recall team and define these roles and responsibilities, now it's time to develop a recall plan. And these 13 steps are just very general steps. In your actual recall plan, you need to actually write out what the process is for this. But these are the general steps, again, to kind of the action steps of a recall action plan. So first, obviously, we need to determine if a recall is necessary. If it's a complaint from a customer that received a moldy flower, is this just one complaint that we've received, or did we receive 10 complaints from consumers about a moldy product? So once again, we need to determine if this was an isolated incident, or maybe the complaint wasn't valid, and so that there isn't a recall that needs to be made. That does happen. I've had concerned sites call me before and say, hey, we received a complaint about this flower being moldy. When we received it, there wasn't even mold in it. And so right there, they determined that the issue wasn't even valid. So obviously, there's no need for a recall. So obviously, the first step is always determining if a recall is necessary or not. And then from there, so if we determine that a recall is necessary, then we need to assemble the recall team and begin working through these steps together. And so the next step after we assemble the recall team is determining the risk classification of the product under recall. And so these are the classifications from the FDA. And I know the cannabis industry is not regulated by the FDA right now, but we all know that federal legalization is going to come at some point in time, and it's going to be very similar classification to this. So using this system will be beneficial for you moving forward. So class 1 is the worst type of recall risk classification that you could have. There's very reasonable probability of serious health risk. This would be for things like salmonella, listeria, or undeclared allergens, maybe in your edibles products, things like that. Class 2, there's still risk there, but it could be temporary or reversible, and so that could be things like norovirus. If you're not familiar with norovirus, it spreads very quickly. It's most common called food poisoning. You might get an upset stomach, diarrhea, things like that. But it's going to go away eventually, and there's normally not any serious health risk there. Class 3 is the least risky out of the 3 classifications, and it's not likely to cause health risk. This could be things like mold, non-organic labeled as organic, and things like that. So after we assemble the recall team and we determine that a recall is necessary, then we need to classify it and determine how serious the recall is. And so that's step number 3. Step number 4, we need to send notification of the problem to your local regulators. I don't know any state regulations that don't require this, and this is going to be the same once we get to the federal legalization level, and it's the same for any FDA regulated product that you have to notify your regulators. And so that's a notification that's probably going to get sent from your legal counsel or your QA department or public relations team, depending on your organization. Step 5 is identify and locate all products subject to recall according to their tracking information. So one of the nice things about being in the cannabis industry, especially on the medical and recreational side, is that the states pretty much mandate that you have seed to sale traceability software. it does make it a lot easier to trace products. So there's one benefit of being in the cannabis industry, whereas as food manufacturers not always have that luxury of having really nice traceability software. So there's really three levels to this. Once again, is the product, has it not left your warehouse? Is it still in control of the company? This is the best case scenario, right? It hasn't reached retailers. It hasn't reached consumers. We haven't made any of our customers mad. We have control of the product, and we're able to reconcile 100% of that affected lot. The next level is the retail level. So the product has been shipped to retailers, but it has not left the retailers, has not been sold to consumers. Also not as bad, but you're still going to make your retailers, who are your customers, upset that they have to send product back. This might leave them short-handed with short supply of products. And so although you're not getting any customers sick or consumers sick, you kind of made these retailers mad. Still not that terrible of a situation. The last level, the consumer level, is the one that we want to be most concerned with. Obviously, this is the level where product has reached consumers, and so they potentially have either already gotten sick or received affected product, and so therefore we need to either have those consumers destroy the product themselves or send it back to us. We like to at least get some of that back, especially if the retailer doesn't have any left, or we don't have any left on site, because we want to be able to test their product and see where what the root cause and what the issue was, if we don't already know. So now that we've identified and located all the products, if there is products that are still under the company's control, we need to quarantine those, put those on hold, and that's when we can start doing internal testing or sending it to a third-party ISO 17025 accredited lab to get tested, to see what the issue was, and once again, hopefully determine that root cause. And then step 7, we need to compile a list of all the distribution outlets of the product under recall. So this is where we would list out all of the retailers that maybe have received this product. If we are vertically integrated and we are supplying our own dispensaries, let's say, then we need to understand what patients or what consumers that product was supplied to. Once again, hopefully you have this all in your seed to sale traceability software. If not, then makes this process a lot harder. And then we need to notify them. So we've identified them in step 7 and compiled a list of who's received the products. And then step 8 is notifying everyone through decided communication. So what that means is, are we doing it through emails? Are we sending letters out? We probably, send out a press release, which is step 9, or anything along those lines. Basically, just notifying that, hey, this is what's wrong with the product. This is what you should do if you have received this product, whether it's destroy it or send it back to the company, things like that. And then, like I said, step 9 is if it's necessary, especially if it's a major recall, there probably needs to be a press release or some kind of notification made to the public, whether it's through your website, etc. Step 10 is, now that we have sent out these notifications to retailers, to consumers, once again, some of them are probably just going to destroy the product. Others are going to return the product to you. If products are being returned to you, you need to control those. You need to have those quarantined and put on hold. Once again, probably in the same location, a dedicated location in your warehouse or vault, and make sure that you have control over those products, and make sure that those products don't leave that hold area until they're ready to be destroyed. Excuse me. And then step 11, we need to take the appropriate corrective action. So is this disposal? Is this fixing the problem? For example, an example of fixing the problem could be that some states allow for further processing. For example, if your total yeast and mold count is high, and the products, it was tested and has already reached consumers, you might be able to recall that product and then extract it further. Most states, though, do not allow that. They want you to destroy the product. So make sure you're following your local regulations in that scenario. But we don't need to just take a corrective action. We need to also find the root cause of the issue and follow our corrective action procedures, which we're not going to get into that today. But essentially, what you need to do is determine what was the cause of the problem and then implement a corrective action to ensure that that problem doesn't happen again. So once we've done that, we should have a good idea of how much of the product we have received. So how much was returned to us, how much was destroyed by either retailers, or how much was reached consumers and was not destroyed or returned. Then we can determine how much of that lot or batch of products we had control of. Was it 95%? Was it 100%? Etc. And then from there, we can terminate the recall. And then the last step, and probably one of the most important steps, and a step that a lot of people forget because they think once the recall is terminated, they are done, is to verify the recall effectiveness. How much of that product were you able to get returned back to you? How much of that were you able to identify in the supply chain? Once again, was it 95% of the product? Was it 75%? Or was it 100%? And obviously, the goal is to get 100%, but we do have a little wiggle room there because there will be sometimes consumers that maybe for whatever reason don't see the notifications or pay attention to them, or they've already consumed that product, right? So there we need to verify how effective we did the recall, and if there's any non-conformances or issues that we've seen throughout the recall process, once again, determining what the root cause was that for that reason, and implementing a corrective action plan for that. And so the last thing I want to talk about today is practice makes perfect, or conducting mock recalls. So in CSQ, you're required to perform 2 mock recalls, one during the actual audit, so one during your recertification or certification audit, and then one on your own. That is specific to CSQ. Most regulators may, if they do have a mock recall, requirement in the regulations, typically it's once a year. So once again, know what regulations require, know what certification program you are following requires. If you're following CSQ, know that you'll have to do one while the auditor is there and one on your own, and show proof of that during the audit. But you should, so when performing this mock recall, you should literally follow those steps that we just outlined on the last slide, as if it were a recall. Except what you don't want to do is send out real notifications to suppliers, regulators, consumers, because all that's going to do is tarnish your reputation, and you might have people think that it's a real recall. What I will say is okay to do, and what I've always recommended, is if it is good to send it to your retailers, but make sure that they know it's a mock recall, just to test the notification system and make sure that that contact person that you have on file for them is the correct contact person, and that person's still there, and that person hasn't changed or left the company or changed positions or anything like that. So that is okay. Same with regulators. It's okay to send an email to, normally they'll have an email set up, whether it's compliance at whatever or recalls at whatever. Send them an email, but make sure that you're saying, hey, we are practicing. This is not a recall. This is just a mock. We're just testing our notification channels, right? No need to ever send that to consumers, though. One forward and one backward. So what I mean by this is we should be practicing not just if our final product has an issue. And so what I mean by that is, so let's say our finished product has mold, it gets sent out to consumers. That's one forward, right? That is providing a recall from the consumer back to you. One backward is the complete opposite. So let's say we have an issue with our packaging supplier has a recall, or one of our raw material suppliers has a recall, or maybe we are an edibles company and we're purchasing biomass from another company, and that biomass has an issue and has to be recalled. Well, that biomass was used in our product, and we need to understand how much of our product was affected by that. Same with packaging. Maybe we are getting pre-made labels from a company, and there wasn't one of the allergens listed on those labels. We need to be able to trace that to how many lots were affected by that, how many products were affected by that. And so that's what we mean by one forward, one backward. One backward is one that most people don't test the recall plan for because it is a little bit harder, but it is just as important because there's a lot of times where you are issuing a recall because of not something that you did, but something that one of your suppliers did. And so we need to practice that as well. And then lastly, when you are performing your mock recall, just like you're verifying your effectiveness on an actual recall or after an actual recall, you need to verify the effectiveness after a mock recall. So one of the ways to do this is time yourself. I always say if you can determine where and identify where all of the effective product was within 2 to 4 hours, that's pretty good. And if you're getting 100% effectiveness or 100% of the products under your control, that is amazing, right? So we need to be understanding how fast we're getting this and how much of the product that we're getting under control. And then we need to determine root cause and implement corrective actions as needed. So maybe we do the mock recall and we only are able to locate 75% of the product. That's not anywhere good enough, right? So we need to determine why we're only able to identify 75% of the product. What is the root cause for that? And then implement corrective actions from there. And so that is all I have for you guys today. Let me get the chat box pulled up and see if we have any questions here. Okay, so we got some questions. Okay, so Nina has a question. Our state requires the use of metric for seed to sale traceability. However, all data is lost once all material is sold. How are others ensuring we don't lose this data once it is no longer available in the state system? That's an interesting one, Nina. I've never heard of, I know Metric and BioTracker are not the best systems, which are typically the ones that states require. Although that is required from the state, it is still your responsibility to retain that data. So and unfortunately, this is something that I've seen many times in the industry where companies have two systems. They have the state mandated one, and then they have their own. I hate to say that you would need two systems for that, but if that is the case, and maybe that's something you bring up with the regulators. I've been on audits where I've seen people trying to do recalls in metric, and it's not the easiest. So I know your struggles there, but that it is still your responsibility, unfortunately. And then this is also from Nina. Sorry. How are other states dealing with disposal of recalled material when no organization is licensed for this type of destruction in the state? That is interesting. I don't know if most of the time the states require a third party to dispose of it. There are hazardous waste companies that have made their way into the cannabis industry. I don't know what state you're operating out of, Nina, and what the direct issue is there. That sounds like the state has made a requirement, and just specifically in your state, there's no organization license for that. I would ask your state if you're allowed to destroy it or dispose of it. A lot of times, what states require is you mixing that with or 50% organic material, such as cardboard boxes or things like that. Other states require you to mix it with ethanol or some kind of chemical that's going to destroy it. It just depends. Um, Vape carts, and this looks like this is more of an issue for vape carts. I get it; those are very tricky, especially ones who have the batteries affixed to them. So those one and done vape carts. Hopefully that I know that this kind of doesn't really answer your question. Those are very state specific, and some states have wonky rules. So this is a question. Does your ski mandate the certification body's certified plant need to notify the CB upon a recall? Yes. So you are required. So if you are certified to CSQ and you do have a recall incident, you are required to send a notification to your certification body as well as your regulators, right? So that great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Hey, Raphael. Hey, good to see you, man. You mentioned issues with mold as an example. How would you classify a recall due to mold? Would it be class two? This would be class three under the FDA. Now, the issue there, and one of the things that is debatable in the cannabis industry, if mold on flower, you're inhaling it, you're not ingesting it. So there might be a little bit more risk there. However, I still think it would be class three. And if you're following the FDA class risk classification, then it's classified as a class three. Last question here. It looks like, does CSQ require two sets of review for independence of a CB plant decision to decide no recall or a recall situation? I'm not sure what you mean there. Can you clarify in the chat box? I'm gonna say no off the top of my head just because um, the well, it wouldn't be up to the CB if they recalled or not. Basically, the yes, okay, I see what you're saying. So if they're determining if it's a recall or not internally, most of the time you're going to be working with your regulators on this. But most of the time you're able to determine if that recall is or if that complaint. Most of the time it's going to come from a complaint, right? For either from a consumer or retailer or whoever. When that complaint comes in, and you determine that it's not valid, if you've done third party testing on that product and determine that there isn't any issues, then obviously right then and there you can make the recall this that it's not a recall, right? However, in the instance where it comes from test results and things like that, then sorry, I'm just reading the question. Yeah, the regulator could, and sorry, this is the same question, going off the same question. External regulator is a sanction, and that might come as so soon if situation does not escalate to that level. Yeah, once again, there is some determination on the facility to determine if the complaint or whatever is valid or not. Most of the time, you're working with your regulators to determine if there's a recall, and they're going to give you some guidance on that. So if you're not sure, I would recommend you either A, call your certification body, or B, or call your regulators, if not both. Hopefully, I answered that question. Okay. Any more questions? All right, awesome, guys. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you. Hopefully, you guys learned a little bit about recalls and CSQ, and how to develop an effective recall plan. Thank you guys very much. And like I said, this is recorded, and we will be sending this out to all attendees. So thank you.